Welcome to the Woman Worriers podcast, where we're working to help you call a truce with your anxiety. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. Now, here's your host, Elizabeth Cush, LCPC.
Hi, and welcome back to the Woman Worriers podcast. Thanks again to all of you listeners and subscribers. If you have not subscribed, I would love to have you do so. It helps increase the audience, but it also lets iTunes or whoever the podcast provider know that people are listening and tuning in, and then gets shared with a broader audience. So I would truly appreciate subscribers, as well as if you feel so moved to write a review, an honest review of what you think of the podcast. That'd be great too. Today, my guest is Jennifer Wolfe-Hagstrom. She is a licensed clinical social worker in Amherst, New Hampshire. She's passionate about connection through kindness and brings her passion for social justice and creative spirit to her therapy work. After earning her master's in social work in New York City, she found her way back to New England to reconnect with nature and a slower lifestyle. Jennifer has a variety of experiences contributing to her clinical style, including a bachelor's degree in education, 6 years of not-for-profit trauma-informed work, intensive dialectical behavior therapy training, and a decade of personal mindfulness practice, as well as a lifetime of creative exploration. Jennifer and I are going to be talking about SoulCollage and how bringing SoulCollage into therapy can really enhance the therapeutic experience. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to the Woman Worriers podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm really excited to chat today. Jennifer is going to talk to us about all kinds of creative things we can do in therapy. But before we jump into that, if you wouldn't mind just telling the audience a little bit about you and what got you where you are today, what inspired you to do the work you do.
Sure. So I'm a clinical social worker in private practice, and I'm at a residential farm setting, and I work with people of any gender or sexual identity to heal from trauma and learn to connect with themselves and love themselves. Many of my clients have anxiety and sensitivity and a need for more skills to live a meaningful life that they really enjoy. It's been a long journey to get here, as all of our journeys are.
Yeah.
I actually didn't know that I would be a social worker for quite a long time. I was kind of dabbling with theater, and then maybe I was going to be a teacher and a bunch of different things. And I kind of fell into social work when I had started teaching, and I was like, I care more about emotions than I do about, curriculum.
Right.
And so then I just kind of started doing some social worky jobs with kids. And that kind of led me to, okay, well, this is what I want to do, and get my degree. And since then, I've been doing clinical work in either an outpatient settings or private group practices. And my private practice now just turned a year old. So, yay! Very exciting. Yeah, thank you. I'm learning more and more that the more authentic and connected I am with myself, the more everything's kind of aligning for me to be doing stuff that, really fills me up and makes me feel really good, rather than doing a 9-to-5 kind of situation.
Yeah.
So I bring all of that to the work with my clients, like all of us do. I think, the relationship is so important because we connect as human beings. I'm also a person with anxiety. I'm also a trauma survivor. I'm also a person that has gone through a lot of trials and tribulations and healing. And I like to bring that to share with other people, because I know when I was in some of those places, I definitely didn't think it was possible to come out the other side. So I like to kind of bring in these different modalities, like we were kind of talking about going into the animal assisted work that I do, and then also some creative expression stuff and SoulCollage work. And all of these things are pieces that, I feel very strongly about clinically, partially because it's helped me as well. And I've seen it help so many others. So that's kind of my style, really kind of authentic and, just being myself. And
well, and it's amazing to me, sorry to interrupt you, but that the value of being authentic and knowing, true to yourself, so that the work feels, real, and that we're really present in it, takes a lot of our own work to get there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think I fully understood that going into graduate school. I'm a relatively new graduate. My private practice is going to be 4 years old. So, very exciting. But they didn't really talk about that. They were like, well, you should be in therapy at some point in your life. I'm like, well, how about ongoing therapy while I'm doing therapy? Because I need to know what's happening for me while this is all happening. But anyway.
Oh, yeah. And I think that that's something that, definitely within my realm with social work, it's a little more, less of a us and them kind of thing. But there's still that kind of idea of like, well, you're going to be the clinical person doing the clinical work, helping a person that, isn't a clinician or something like that. So there being this divide and this idea, that we should know everything and we should have all of the answers, but there's no way to be in a place where you're really comfortable to help anybody else unless you've done similar stuff for yourself, I think.
Yeah.
I definitely wish in my grad program that was like mandatory, I wish it was. Because I definitely, that's been one of the greatest tools that I've had for contributing to the work that I'm doing with my clients is the work I've done for myself.
Amen. I am 100% there with you on that. So you briefly mentioned that you use some more creative interventions in your therapy practice. So talk to us a little bit about that, and, especially as relating to anxiety, maybe trauma, why using creative interventions can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah. So, I use many different interventions, and all of them are really kind of aimed at helping people to feel safe and relaxed and able to connect with their own stories and their own truth. And so every kind of different modality that I'm using has that kind of goal. So, creativity in general helps us shift from this logical brain mindset, and when we're usually in that mindset, we're trying to find the answers and figure out, A to B and how can we, fix this problem kind of thing. But when we can kind of shift to the right brain a little bit more, we can connect with our subconscious and what's kind of going on beneath the surface to address what our brain is really focused on behind the scenes. I'm thinking about the work that I do with SoulCollage. So, someone might come into session and be like, oh, I'm fine. Everything's good. We don't need to talk about anything. I don't even know what we're going to do today, Right. And then I'm like, okay, well, why don't we just, do some SoulCollage and see what happens? And then all of a sudden, this big stuff emerges. And it's from being able to feel safe and comfortable and kind of connect with your own self in that way. And then it's like, whoa, maybe your inner critic is really running the show. And we need to really address that. Or maybe you're feeling really unsafe or really, really anxious. And that stuff will just come up in the creative process, just kind of allowing to tap into to the subconscious.
Yeah. So getting the less logical problem-solving part of your brain to relax, to allow that creative process to kind of give you that grounding and balance so that you can access all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think especially for those of us with anxiety, there is this draw and this pull to find all of the answers all the time.
And, predict all the problems and find the answers.
Yes. So, if there is a problem, there must be a very clear solution that we will find and then we will fix it. And that's not always the way the world works.
No.
I found for myself, I do SoulCollage for myself, being able to really let these different parts of myself show up, like my inner critic or my, part that feels in chaos or my anxious self, then I'm able to really be like, whoa, like we need to take care of this. I need to listen to these parts of myself that are trying to grapple with finding control when they can't, and how can we find peace and safety in a world that feels so out of control sometimes, and in our lives that feel so out of control sometimes. So SoulCollage allows to, first you can see the stuff that comes up, and then it can create this dialogue that you have with these different parts of yourself. So I might ask my anxious self, like, what do you need right now?
Yeah.
Or can you tell me why you're here? Like, why are you showing up?
Yeah.
And to really kind of tap into that inner wisdom. And really and I really believe we have all of the answers for ourselves.
Yeah.
As long as we can connect with ourselves enough to really see all of the different dynamics going on within ourselves.
Absolutely. That openness to listening and awareness to be able to hear it and feel it and be present with it. Can you, because I've done SoulCollage a couple of times, but I would love for you to sort of explain the process of what it really is and how it does help us access those parts and dialogue with them. Yeah.
So I just recently became a SoulCollage facilitator. So I went to big training in California and got my little certificate, which is great because now I can actually talk about SoulCollage, which is a trademark, trademarked thing. It's like a whole method and process that is developed by Sina Frost. And, she has a bunch of resources, books and audio recordings and things like that really dive deeper into SoulCollage, deeper than I'm going to be able to explain here in a few minutes.
Sure. But just so the audience has an idea of what we're talking about for their own. Yeah.
So it's a creative method where you make these small collages on cards they're about 5 by 8, I think. And you just kind of show different pieces of yourself on each individual card. So you create a deck of cards that are your own. And they really are kind of like slivers of your soul, pieces of your soul. And, there are different suits to the deck, but, the basic essence of it is you're externalizing these parts that you have within yourself into a collage that then you can look at separate from yourself and dialogue with to have an idea of, what this part of you needs to say or why it's there, the messages that it has for you, the gifts that it can provide, or also how it might be getting in the way for you. So, you kind of create these different collages and it can kind of really kind of open things wide up. I mean, when I do workshops or I work with clients doing SoulCollage, there's usually this kind of moment of like, whoa. Because like at first you're like, oh, we're just making a cute little collage. Like, oh, this is cool. I like this picture. I like that picture. And then when we kind of allow it to speak or allow it to kind of tell us who it is or why it's there, that's usually when the whoa moment happens of like, oh my gosh, there's this part of me that I didn't even realize was, there, or I had no idea that I was feeling so, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Insecure, upset or whatnot.
Yeah. So through the process of creating these little mini collages with, I guess, magazine art, right?
It can be, yeah. Really just anything that's a visual. I use a lot of books that I find from like Goodwill or something like that.
Okay.
But or you can also create your own images that go on it. But the easiest way is just, you can go through a magazine and cut out images that pop out to you and then put them together the way that it feels right. And then you've got a card. Yeah.
And so tell us, what are some of the questions that help you like dialogue with this part, or even, do people know what part is showing up on the card before they begin the sort of dialoguing after process?
I feel like at first, like when you're first starting out with it, probably not. Maybe once you've done it a few times, you might have an idea of like, oh, that's interesting before you actually dialogue with it. But usually it's just kind of like, oh, these are nice images that I kind of like. And then when the dialogue happens, you can kind of get an idea. So the big phrase, the phrase that goes along with SoulCollage and the method is, I am one who. So you kind of start with that. So allowing the card to tell you, I am one who, is patient. I am one who is anxious. I am one who is worried, and kind of explore that question a little bit with the card. And then I like to have the card kind of present what gifts it has for me, because there's also this tenet of SoulCollage that there can be, positive and negative, light and dark to each card. So, even if it's this card that's kind of scary to look at, what are you going to offer me? Like, what gifts do you have for me? And then what gifts can I give to you? How can I help you out, this part that's showing up?
Wow.
And what's the message for today? Because there's also this belief that the cards are going to maybe have a different message depending on the day, depending on the moment, because we are evolving, dynamic human beings that, might be different one moment from the next.
I love that. I like that idea that it may shift and change the messages.
Yeah, and that's really powerful too. For myself, my inner critic card, which is a really intense, scary looking card that showed up just kind of the way that I'm talking about it, like just doing SoulCollage one day and boom, there it is.
Wow.
And over time, that card is now speaking so much gentler to me. At first it was like, rah, you need to do this and you need to do that. And now when it pops up, it's kind of like, hey, remember that I'm here and kind of keep me in check.
Wow.
Which is just really powerful. Just really amazing. And I think also, shows the amount of growth that this method can offer. Once we can see these pieces, then we can kind of be a little more aware of them and know what we need to do so that we can be, living the life we want to live rather than the life designed by the inner critic,
Yeah. Well, and to me, the question, what are your gifts? Is that what you said? Like, I love that there's that opportunity to acknowledge that there is some benefit, or there is some positive, that this part of you is coming from a place of wanting to help. And maybe the inner critic isn't always as kind as we would like it to be, but it comes from a place of good intentions.
Yeah. Because there's a reason all of our parts are there,
Right.
They all are attempting to serve a purpose.
And acknowledging what the positives are. Like, I don't know. I just think with self-compassion too, acknowledging that even though we're struggling, like maybe this struggle is helping me see myself better, and helping me be more in tune with what I need in these moments.
Yeah. And that meaning making can be, so important, especially for those of us that, feel really deeply or, want to hope for there to be a bigger purpose to our struggles,
Absolutely. And So for you, SoulCollage, from what I understand, it can be done individually as well as in a group. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so does the process of sharing, I know for me initially learning about SoulCollage, like the idea of bringing forth these parts that I wasn't 100% sure what was going to show up in a group setting felt a little overwhelming.
Yeah.
But can you talk about what that process is like for groups that you've held?
Yeah. So, the idea of developing safety and having a safe space is really, really crucial and important, because we're really, and I always kind of preface workshops or groups that I hold, with this, because we're sharing pieces of our souls here. This isn't just, I'm going to tell you my name and the job that I do kind of thing. Like, this is, deep stuff that warrants, really important holding space. So individually, like when I'm working with a client, we have that safe space already developed, right? Because that's the relationship that we have and the consistency of the office and the, all of the things that are kind of set up. But in a group, there's a need to really create and honor the safety of the space by, I use a meditation bell by kind of showing like this is going to be a sacred time. And I'm going to, show that by ringing the bell at the beginning and the end, because this is a different kind of space than if we were to bump into each other at the grocery store or something like that. And then also I like to kind of ease into the sharing. So, at first, if we're going to do a few cards within a workshop or a group, the first card, maybe you just process on your own so that you can feel safe in sharing, whatever you want to share after you've processed the card.
Okay.
So, have everybody kind of process their own. Then we'll go around and be like, if you want to share, you can tell us kind of like the gem that came from your card, like a one sentence gem or something. And then if feeling comfortable enough with your second card, you would be able to process. But there's also this idea in SoulCollage that we are allowing for each individual to find their own answers and to access their own wisdom. So we are not going to interpret for anybody else. We are like the best gift we can give is to bear witness and to just see what's happening and, allow that to be the great gift we're giving. Because I think a lot of us want to help, right? So if somebody is maybe struggling to find a word, or they're not really sure, what the card is saying, maybe try and give them suggestions or something. But that's not the purpose. The purpose is for you to tap into your own wisdom and your own truth. So I really kind of set that up, and throughout a workshop or a group, I explain many times, like, remember, this is deep soul work. Remember, your greatest gift is to bear witness, and usually within the setting, then I'll overhear people when they're interacting with a partner, processing a card, being like, oh, I'm not supposed to say anything, so I won't say anything. But I think those reminders are really important because we're not used to this kind of connection in our world, in our culture, even. We're not used to bearing our souls to one another and just witnessing it. We're very much about like helping and, getting through the day and doing what needs to be done and whatnot. And so I think it takes a lot of reminders and pointers when you're first starting to understand. And then over time, participants, if they come to multiple ones, they'll just kind of know. And that can be also the draw of coming back. Because, you can be safe in your space and people are just going to witness and that's okay.
That is very cool. And I was reminded of an exercise. I was just recently at a intensive self-compassion retreat. And one of the exercises we did in like a group of 3 was each person had a chance to tell a story that, was difficult, but they grew from. They gained some knowledge or, came away with something positive. There was a silver lining. And you had 5 minutes to tell the story. And the other 2 people couldn't speak. They were just bearing witness. They were just there with compassionate expression and, whatever we needed to do to make the person feel heard. But for each one of us in my little group, it was this sense of like how different the story can be if we're allowed to just tell it without anyone else asking questions or, reaching out or offering suggestions. If we can just speak this, whatever it is, it was very powerful, which sort of reminds me of this process too. Like I can share what I need to share with people that are just willing to be here and be with me in this.
Yeah. I think that, that sounds like a really great exercise and really kind of reinforcing that space is okay. Silence is okay. I think that's another thing especially for those of us that are anxious. Like if there's silence, it's like, we need to say something. We need to like ask a question or lead the conversation or whatnot. But, if we can just like trust that it's all going to be okay, even if we don't say anything. It can be really, really powerful for both ends, the person telling and the person witnessing.
Yes, I agree. And you had mentioned earlier that some of the population that you specialize working with are trauma survivors. Is SoulCollage work a good thing to do with people who've experienced trauma?
Yeah. I think as with anything you're doing in session with a person that's experienced trauma, you want to be really aware of, trauma theory and kind of understand the process of needing to heal and whatnot. And, as I've been integrating SoulCollage more into my individual sessions, I've also realized kind of the nuances to how to access it. So, if you're in the beginning stages of treatment, it's going to be more about, developing safety skills and being able to feel safe and comfortable in your own body and know that you can, handle whatever's going to happen before you jump into all of the processing of everything that happened, if you ever go there.
Yep.
So, with that, having the structure around it. So, for example, if I've got somebody coming in and they're interested in SoulCollage, but we're at the beginning of our, trauma treatment stages, it'll be more about like, let's create a card. It'll be more intentional. So let's create a card that is your, safety card. Or let's create a card that is going to represent self-care or nurturing, or something like that. It'll be kind of contained, like you want to have that container so that it feels safe. Because certainly if you're just kind of like, let's just see what happens, we could definitely jump in. And I call it like, pushing you off a cliff with no parachute. And I don't want to do that. That's not going to be helpful for anybody. So, but there are ways to, and then maybe down the line, once we've got those safety skills and, able to maybe dip our toe into processing a little bit of past trauma, then we could, see what's a little deeper to come up, again, with those containers and the safety stuff set up.
Nice.
But it can still be really powerful, just kind of following the trauma theory stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, and I love that idea of, as hopefully any trauma therapists are doing this, but yes, having that safe space within yourself that no matter what you're talking about, you have that option to go back to that, whether it's the card or a visualization or a place within yourself or your home that feels safe. That's so important.
Yes.
Yeah. So if people were interested in finding out more about SoulCollage or how to find a therapist who's doing SoulCollage, how would they find them?
Yeah, so the SoulCollage website, soulcollage.com. There's so many resources on there. The website is it's not the most modern website, disclaimer, but there is it's a rich treasure trove, if you dig around on there. But you can find lists of workshops, and you can, search by your area, which I think is really, really neat. And if anyone's interested, the best way to really get exposed to it is to go to an introductory workshop. Okay. To experience it for yourself is really, you can read about it all you want, but when you experience it, that's really where you can see the power of it.
Yeah.
And there's also, a lot of resources and articles on the website as well about just kind of what is it, what are the principles, things like that that are great to find.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if you had, a tip or some piece of knowledge that you would like to impart to the listeners, what might that be?
I think if you're able to find ways to allow the different parts of yourself to be heard, I think that there's so much healing work that can happen with that. So whether that's through SoulCollage or, a different creative expression or, even just talk therapy as well, but being able to access your different parts and let them really speak their truth. Yeah.
So powerful.
My tip. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, hopefully in a future podcast, I would actually have somebody lined up to interview about internal family systems, which is all about connecting with your parts. And, but yeah, very powerful. And, it's easy, I feel like, to integrate the parts work into other types of therapies, such as like SoulCollage, but also talk therapy, meditation, so much self-compassion, all those practices.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of overlap for sure.
Yeah. So SoulCollage.com, that I will add to the show notes. But how do people find you?
So I'm online. I have a website for my private practice. It's kindnesscornerfarm.com. Also on Facebook, Kindness Corner Farm. I'm on Instagram as well.
All right.
Corner Farm.
Nice.
Yeah. So all over the place there. And when I have workshops that are upcoming, I also post them on the SoulCollage website as well as my own website.
Cool.
For workshops there. Yeah.
Nice. Well, Jennifer, I really enjoyed our conversation so much, and I appreciate your coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking with you.
I really enjoyed talking to Jennifer about the SoulCollage work. It's a very powerful experience. I've done it a couple of times, and it really helps bring forth parts of us that need to be heard, and creating this dialogue with these parts of ourselves that maybe have not been heard before can be an incredibly powerful therapeutic experience. And I encourage you, if you want to know more about it, I have included all the resources in the show notes. And as Jennifer said, parts work can be really incredibly powerful and important in therapy. And I will be exploring what parts work is through the internal family systems perspective in an upcoming episode. So keep an eye out for that. Have a wonderful week. Ciao for now from this Woman Worrier.
Thanks for listening and subscribing to the Woman Worriers podcast. Music was written and performed by Andy Cush. If you'd like more information on this episode, you can find the show notes, the resources shared today, and links to the guests' profiles at womanworriers.com.